We're talking about the spiritual path and the ins and outs of it. And I was just watching a video this morning describing the different stages of mysticism and the different approaches. Very interesting. I find it fascinating to read the scholarly approach to mysticism, because I don't have that. And so it reminds me of when I was a little kid. I had a map of Disneyland, and Disneyland was like heaven, that was like just to die for. And this map was one of those simplified kids versions where it showed just a real simple diagram of the roads, and then here was Tomorrowland, and here was the jungle, and here was the castle, and but each location was like a little drawing of the feature of that part of the theme park. And so it was like a revelation for me, because I'd been there. But when you're in a maze, you can't see the maze, right? You just see the individual parts of the maze. And so to get an aerial view of the maze is like mind-blowing. And so that was a little bit of what it was like for me, what it is like for me anytime I get a scholarly explanation of the mystical path. And it's like it's almost too like being in your home. You're in your home, and say it's a 2-story house, and you're in the living room, and it's the living room, and then you go in the kitchen, and it's the kitchen. And the two rooms may relate a little bit, especially if you can kind of look from the kitchen into the living room. You get a sense of where they are. But when it comes to the rooms above you, most of the time, you're just vaguely aware of where they're placed. In vaguely in the sense, like if the ceiling were made of glass, it would probably be very surprising to you the exact location of those rooms, because when you're in those rooms, that's all you see is that room. You're very familiar with the room, but not in relationship to the other rooms. When I read of these different mystical states and stages of development, it's like that for me. It's like, oh, that's what they're talking about. And because I was formally trained in a mystery school, but we didn't take the scholarly approach. We took the experiential approach. So it was like full immersion for us. And we didn't study a lot of we didn't study any of the scholars, that's for sure. But we and not even the writings of the mystics so much. When we did read, it was like compilations of notes that were summaries of some of these things. And then
Did you just try stuff and see how it worked out, and then?
Well, that wouldn't be an accurate description, because trying, is like experimentation. And when I say formal training, we were taught by teachers who had already gone through generations of trying, and generations that stretch back, almost millennia, because a lot of the techniques that we used have been in play for centuries and centuries, like Rosicrucian stuff. It's been around for a long time. So the experimentation has pretty much been worked out. And what we use were techniques and full immersion kinds of devotional practices and occult practices that had already been proven to work. And so we just boom, 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 just popped right through those mystical stages of development, like on a train. And so, and this is something that's not really around much. I mean, there are a few schools, but not like, I think they're harder to find now. So, so when I see these scholarly accounts, it's like, it's kind of engages my brain a little bit, so I can get kind of the lay of the land. It helps me teach it better. And, because a lot of the mystical experience is ineffable. You can't F with it. Sorry. It's ineffable that you can't describe it, Although I try, and I think I'm pretty good at a lot of it, but there are certainly those stages where you just can't describe it. The only thing like I can do is take a person like right up to the door and open the door and say, okay, go in there. They go in there and they come back out and they go, wow. So that's what it's about. So the thing that it's really important to know that the mystical path, the spiritual path, is not a straight line progression. It's a spiral. And so every time you go around the spiral, you get a little taste of what's on the upper levels of the spiral. And you come around again and you get a taste of another aspect of what's at that full-blown mystical experience. And you keep going around and around, getting more and more and more of a set of experiences that have been pretty much mapped out now. And the reason that this is important is because there are those stages of development have been labeled. You know, like one of the labels is the non-dual consciousness state of non-duality. Another state might be, called enlightenment. And it's words like that that can intimidate us. You see, they become intimidating because we take something, say, like enlightenment, and we put it on a pedestal that's so high, it's unreachable. You know, we make it larger in our mind than it needs to be, because on those lower rungs of the spiral, we will actually encounter the enlightenment experience, but at a scale that we can handle. You see, it's like that's the taste of it, but it's the taste. It's not like a simulated taste. It's tasting the actual thing. So we get these glimpses, you know, and this is part of the grace of God. It's how it's set up, because it would be depressing if we couldn't get that taste, because then how would we know we were on the right path? Yeah. It's like breadcrumbs. You know, we go along, we pick up a breadcrumb. Oh yeah, I'm on the right path. And it's by tasting it. So what I would like to urge you is to identify your mystical experiences and realize that they are a taste of the full-blown experience. You see, and every time you come around that spiral, you get a little more and a little more and a little more. So if somebody says, asks you, are you enlightened? You can say, no, not fully, but I certainly tasted it. You know, do you know what the non-dual consciousness state is? Have you experienced that? Well, not totally, but I've certainly tasted it. I've peeked into that door. I maybe stuck my head in. I might even have stepped into that state and then come back out of it. So I know what it is. I know what it is. And that's enough to keep you going. You see, that's like, okay, I've seen that. I want more of it. And that's what keeps us motivated on the spiritual path. But if we see, here's the problem. You have too many teachers out there who have not experienced it, or they've experienced it on lower levels. And so they talk about these states in such an exalted expression that they themselves have put it on a pedestal. And so they train all of their students to see it in the same way. And it becomes like a receding horizon. You know, you can never actually touch it. And that's why people drop out, because they think they're never going to get there, when all along they've been getting tastes of it. You see? So I want to encourage you in your meditation and in your studying and in your going within, that you celebrate those instances, you know, really acknowledge and be grateful. You know, this is where gratitude on the spiritual path really applies. Be grateful for these little experiences or big experiences, and then ask for guidance, and so that you know what that tastes like, And then when the next opportunity arises on the next rung up, you'll recognize it and you'll go for it even more.
May I make a comment on that?
Yes, please.
This past January, I had like a series of those, but one of them I think was the non-dual experience, and it lasted, I don't know, 2 to 3 weeks. I looked at everybody. Everybody felt as if they were, when you're a kid, you meet new kids, and everybody seems like, oh, they're my best friend. I felt that way towards everybody. Everybody, I could see the consciousness in everyone, and it made me feel one with them because it's the same consciousness that's in me, and I still feel that. That's. I don't think that's ever going to go away, but um, and also the fact that every person deserves dignity and respect from you, from everyone, to because they're all children of God, and all these things were coming to me that month from December 31st to February 1st of 2020. I was a different person. Those experiences really changed me.
Isn't that wonderful? Yeah, that's actually like an
Yeah.
initiation, a spiritual initiation, because and I define that term initiation as moving from one chamber of consciousness to another. It's very much, it's what's depicted in the Great Pyramid of Giza, because that was a temple for spiritual initiation. It wasn't a tomb. And they would take the initiate and go from one chamber to the next. And especially like in the Grand Gallery, that had graduated steps. And it was, you only went as far as your teacher would let you, until you really internalized what he was teaching you. And then so it formalized the process and gave it an objective measure, so to speak. And so, by ritualizing it, it really, cements. That's what rituals are for, is to cement the inner realization, because like you put the experience into the earth, you incarnate it and you act it out. That's what Freemasonry is about. It's what Rosicrucianism is about. And all of the schools that have these ritual forms of teaching, that's what they do. They nail it, that I'm not using that word as a pun, because it's nailing Christ to the cross, which means your spirit is being affixed to matter. That's what the crucifixion is. It's the spirit and matter being nailed together. And all the implications of that, it's like you can't nail yourself to the cross. That's what a teacher is for. So, if you don't have like a physical teacher, it can be either one on the other side, or it can just simply be life experiences. Because how many life experiences have nailed you to a cross, right? Mm-hmm. So this is true on many different levels. It's scalable. So,
Michael, may I please just say something?
Yeah.
Something that I've come across quite a lot in the last while regarding this whole path on the books that I read, and especially in this past week, they say that in many cases, your spiritual path leading up to enlightenment has to be a sacrifice similar in nature to what Jesus did on the cross. I don't know how, if you've heard of that before. So the suffering and the pain and whatever you go through must be that type of sacrifice in order to finally achieve that purity or whatever.
Yes, that's very, very true. And it's symbolic, right? It's symbolically true, which means, like, when we talk about getting nailed to the cross, we're not talking literally, right? This is a metaphor. It's an analogy. So
the more those experiences you have, you can see, as what she was saying, you can see the correlation to what the Gospels were saying,
Yes. Well, the key element to the crucifixion, and this is like at the core of Christ's teachings, is that he went voluntarily. You see, he voluntarily submitted himself to the sufferings of the world. because he did it all for God. You see, and when you have that kind of meaning in your life, then you can bear up under any circumstances. Victor,
is that like nailing your ego to the cross? And
yeah,
literally,
because you can voluntarily go through that experience, you know, experiences of humiliation that would take down, if you don't believe in God and you don't have any higher conception of what reality is about, and you go through an extremely humiliating situation, experience, that can take you down. That can ruin you for the rest of your life or cause you to end your life. You know, but if you have a higher direction, then you see, oh, okay, I just stumbled there. I didn't die.
mm-hmm.
It was just a speed bump. And
But
then
in whose eyes? The 3D world's eyes, or in God's eyes? You know,
well,
the
it's always our
people who live in an
self-image.
ego.
Yeah, it's always our self-image that takes a hit. Oh, I thought I was the golden boy, you know, and now I just realize, nope. Right. And that never ends. See, this is this is the eternality of the whole story. That never ends. We're all on some point of Jacob's ladder or on that spiral. It's kind of the same thing. So like you may be at rung 4 or 5, and you can look down at people on rungs 2 or 3, and you can say, wow, I see them. I understand what they're going through. But then you look up and you see people on rungs 6 and 7, and you go, oh my God, I'll never be able to do that. You know, but they're looking down at you saying, come on, you know, you can do it. You can do it. So, so we're all on that scale, all of us. There's nobody that's not. So there's never a reason to hold yourself above people below you in development, as though that makes you special, because you're just a, you know, fill in the blank to in comparison to the steps above you. So that's a great equalizer. You know, it's a great equalizer. Mm-hmm. And it's the source of our humility. So Don, in answer to your question, that's the main lesson, is that we voluntarily undergo the little crucifixions in our lives because we know they're for a higher purpose. And whether Jesus went through all of those exact experiences the way they're described in the Bible and the road to Calvary, that doesn't really matter, because when we read the description of that, we see the echoes of ancient mystery school teachings. So each step along the way that's highlighted, you know, like the Stations of the Cross in a Catholic church, those are actually a graphical description of the path of initiation. This is what happens, and then after that, this happens, and then this, and this, and this. And that gives people a way to, like my map of Disneyland when I was a kid, it's the same thing. You know, you see it all together and you realize the biggest lesson in that is the realization that it's a process, and that the process has a sequence, and that the process is part of a whole, you see. And that's a big realization. Otherwise, life can seem like chaos, just meaningless, like we're always at the whim of chance or fate. And the Christian teachings, the mystical Christian teachings, refute all of that. They just dismiss all of that. Life is not meaningless. It's imbued with meaning. It's like it projects out of the heart of meaning itself. We are in the story. That's what the Christ story is. We are in that story. That's not about Jesus. Jesus is us. That's what that whole story is about. It's about us. And Jesus is like the summation of all of us. He represents all of humanity. So everything that he went through is a description of what we go through once we set our foot on the spiritual path. And if we don't set our foot on the spiritual path, then it's no longer a spiral, it's just a merry-go-round. Just go around and around, and we keep hitting the same speed bumps and not learning from them, you know. Or if we learn from them, we learn them more from a mundane perspective, and so our spiral is just closely stacked, you know, so that it hardly seems like a spiral at all, like we're not making any progress.
I think they determine progress by the amount of time you've been in a church. I've been here 20 years. Oh, you're growing.
Oh,
well,
yeah, you're growing.
What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything, you know. So,
Dawn, did you want to say something?
Yeah. Do we become enlightened through grace, or is it something that we need to fulfill? Like, is there an end point? Because one of the things that Robert Adams speaks about is how he became enlightened in his maths class at the age of 13. He didn't say, though, that he had been attending various spiritual classes, but basically what he was saying is that if you complete a lifetime where you've done a huge amount of spiritual work and you then come back into another lifetime, sometimes you almost spontaneously awaken or self-realize purely because you've reached that point. I don't know what your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so you're asking whether it's by what we do, you know, can we, you know, the works part of it, is there anything we can do to reach enlightenment? Or does it happen by grace? In other words, is it a gift, you know? And the answer to that is yes. It's both. Remember the movie Field of Dreams? Build it and they will come. So this guy got this, I forget, it's been a long time since I saw the movie, but he gets this idea that just comes to him. He's a farmer. He lives out in the middle of nowhere. He has this big farm, and he gets the idea, this inspiration to build a baseball field because he loves baseball. He just has this compulsion to do it. So he builds it, and he keeps getting this message, build it and they will come. And his neighbors and friends think he's gone out of his mind because, you know, there's no baseball team, there's no venue, there's nothing. All he has is this baseball field now, really nice baseball field with bleachers and everything. And eventually people come, but he doesn't know when they will come. You see, the works part of this program is that you do the basic stuff. You learn how to focus your mind. You learn concentration. You learn how to clean yourself up and take care of the ordinary circumstances in your life as though they were features of your interior life. So if there are things out of order in your physical life, you have to pull that together, knowing that as you do, it's organizing you on the inside. It's changing your thought patterns, and it's bringing you more into focus, like you're becoming more of a real human being. And then you cultivate a prayer life. You do it regularly, and you go into meditation. You do that regularly, and all of that is building the baseball field, right? No one's shown up yet, but you keep doing it. You keep doing it, and then out of the blue, with no warning, like Jesus says, like a thief in the night. It's exactly what he was talking about. You wake up one day and bam, just everything just falls into place at your level, right? At your level. And it's always just a little bit above your level. It's a little bit over your head so that you have something to aspire to, that you can grow into. It's always a little more. That's the grace. That's technically, it's called epigenesis. It's like you get the gift, but there's always a little bit more, so that it shoots just a little over your head. It's like reading an author who uses words you've never seen. You don't know what they mean, so you stop and you look them up. You know, the author is doing you a service because it's always increasing your comprehension, right? Always urging you up in your comprehension. That's what grace is like. It always gives you just a little bit more. And so that's the works and grace equation. And this is really beautifully described in the tarot. The major arcana of the tarot is like the first 22 cards. You have 3 rows of 7, and then you have this card that sits above them all. And the 21 cards below him are a description of the spiritual path, just like the Stations of the Cross in a Catholic church, only much deeper and much more comprehensive. And so the figure at the top is like, this is like the theme that runs through the whole spiritual path. This is like the beginning of the spiritual path. And what it is, it's of a young person, because you're young on the spiritual path, regardless, you can be 90 years old, but on the spiritual path, you can be a young person. This is a young person. He's left the land of the familiar, which is like his home, because he's a hobo. He's got a staff with a bag on the end of it, just like the old depictions of a hobo. And so he's leaving, and his heart is open, his gaze is upward, he wants to realize God, and he's about to step off a cliff. So this card, this first picture, is really the scene of an accident. He's about to step off the cliff. And a lot of people who like the tarot, they'll say, oh no, he's going to just keep walking in on the air, because he's so spiritual. No, because you got to, in order to go up on the spiritual path, you first have to go down. In order to experience the resurrection, you first have to be crucified.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it really does, doesn't it? So that's what's being depicted there. And then all the rest of the cards start describing, the agencies and the methods and the results of all of these different qualities and aspects that we have to work with, that God has created us with, to navigate through that process of spiritual evolution, which is really what it is. And the way this translates in our lives, and it's really good to know, because otherwise it can become discouraging. You do your exercises, you do meditation, you pray, you try to do acts of service and random acts of kindness and all of that, and you think nothing's happening. Well, that's not how it happens. You don't build up it's not the number of things you do, it's the quality of the things that you do. And the higher the quality, it's like when you meditate, are you really doing a quality meditation, or at least are you striving to do it in a high quality way? Or has it become a routine? You see, if it's become a routine, then you might as well stop doing it, because you're not going anywhere with it. It'd be better to go actually apply yourself to some skill that you can really, more tangibly develop. But when you do these things and you really put your life together spiritually in that way, then it will happen, but it happens as though by accident. That's the feeling of it. Like a thief in the night, as Jesus said. And you can't plan it. You just can't plan it. Nor can you get resentful, you see. And this is the crucial part, no pun intended. But when Jesus is on the cross and he says to God, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. That's the negation of resentment. Because if anything will keep one foot nailed to the earth and not let you rise any higher than earth consciousness, it's resentment. That's a killer. That's a soul killer.
So can I say something here, please, Michael?
Yes.
So I'm wondering, as you're talking, I was at I'm studying with the Buddhists, okay? So they don't have the word grace. They maybe the closest thing they have is blessings. So the other night when I was in class, I asked this question: what's the most, on your spiritual path, what's the most transforming? And I gave them a list of experience, knowledge, wisdom, concentration, meditation, and silence. And they all came up with, well, they didn't all, there was only three that spoke. They said meditation. But for me, my most transforming was silence.
Yeah. Yeah. And describe what you mean by silence.
Almost
How
nothing.
do you experience it?
Nothing. No time, no space, no concepts, no, it wasn't nothingness, but there was nothing. So that was the most, and from there, so they always talk about this conventional thing about going up the spiral, but could you start with this silence, this glimpse, and then do the work?
Yeah, very definitely. Did they acknowledge your answer, your experience?
Silence? No. Yeah. No, because I didn't offer it. I was asking the question.
Oh,
and
okay.
Knew by them, none of them thinking silence was theirs. I mean, there's no right or wrong, I guess. But for me, it was silence. And I thought, well, theirs is meditation, so there's no use. I was.
Yeah. Well, it's like the difference between blessing and grace. Those are just two words describing the same thing.
Right.
And silence and nirvana or satori or any of the terms they use, it's the same thing.
But maybe I didn't ask them what meditation, you asked me. I should have asked them what did they mean by meditation, because maybe they didn't mean satori. Maybe they just meant what the Buddhists do. They meditate on loving kindness and you name it, 1,000 things. So maybe that's what they meant was transforming.
Right. Well, there's so much in all of these traditions, in Zen and Sufi and Christian mysticism, all of it. They have these ideas of that they're working with, but and the programs and methodologies that they use to get there, but it's all building the baseball field.
Right.
You see, that's the primary thing. And the problem when you institutionalize this kind of process, then the institution becomes more important than the goal. The process becomes more important than the goal, and people get caught in the process and they deify it, and they lose sight of actually getting through. In Buddhism, they talk about the ferry boat that crosses a river. You're in your mundane consciousness, and you look across the river and you get a glimpse of paradise on the other side. And there's a ferry boat, and the ferry boat is all the methodologies and techniques and processes that you're supposed to go through. And so once you get on the ferry boat and you're out on the river, and the river is really wide, and you're out there a long time, you're doing the process, but then eventually, boom, you reach the other side. And the Buddhists say, get rid of the ferry boat. You no longer need all of the methods. You're now in it. See, and then a whole new program of actualization. Reaching the other shore is like realization. That's spiritual realization. But then you come into the process of actualizing what you have experienced. And how do you integrate that into your life? You see, because you're still alive. You may have left the other shore, but that's just the mundane consciousness. Now you're in a spiritual reality, but you still have your physical body. You still have the circumstances and responsibilities, obligations of your material life. How do you integrate your spiritual consciousness into those things? You see, that's the important part of it. Because so many of us, we've gone far enough on the spiral we've had the tastes of those experiences, and those tastes start to become nibbles, and then they become snacks, and then they become like a lunch, and then they do the full-blown banquet, right? So regardless of where we're at on that spiral, we have to continually integrate that new consciousness into our ordinary, everyday, mundane lives.
Live it.
What's that?
Live it.
Live it. Yeah.
That's
You know,
the hard part.
Walk the talk.
Hmm.
Yeah. And that's what I specialize in, because I call them awareness techniques. So that it doesn't matter what I'm doing. If I'm shopping for food at the grocery store, or if I'm driving my car on the freeway, I have ways to enhance my awareness of what I'm doing. The most mundane, the most ordinary activities, I can turn them into spiritual exercises, and it's amazing. Really, it's truly blows my mind every time.
Michael, hey, Michael.
Yes.
Is it somewhat accurate to associate the falling off the cliff as a falling away or taking down of a level of a lower level of consciousness once you get a glimpse into the higher level? In other words, your life reorients. You go through a process that the first card of the major arcana, he's looking up, about to fall off a cliff. I'm just trying to relate to, what does that look like? Is that you're leaving your old life behind that you put together, ego-wise, in terms of your conditioning, your family of origin, the level of consciousness you were at, the values you developed in that level of consciousness. So that's the first question I think you can get out of that. Second is, as we go up the spiral and have more and more of the taste, I would expect that we could also fall off the cliff at those points as well. And again, once again, now getting a glimpse of a higher level of consciousness. What have I built up with the lower level? What needs to go? You want to talk about that a little bit?
Oh, sure. I'd love to. So, so the first part, what does it look like? I'm going to be a little gruesome here, but the lower on the spiral you are, the more brutal the experience is going to be. And so what it looks like, I've never seen this personally. I've seen pictures, they're not nice. But when rock climbers fall off these very tall walls, like in Yosemite, when they're, it's pretty much a free fall all the way until they hit the ground. And usually what happens is the body is dismembered. That's how hard they hit. The body just kind of blows apart. That's what it looks like. Falling off that cliff can take you apart. I mean, it can, and some authors have called it the dark night of the soul. I mean, you can feel literally dismembered, like your life has exploded and there's nothing left to you. That's pretty radical.
Michael,
yes.
Michael, can I, what I've again also heard this analogy a lot, and what I have started relating it to, especially when I meet people that are going through this, is that in 2016, I burnt out and got CPTSD at the same time. And my whole world fell to pieces, like completely. I stopped sleeping. I almost died. Yep. And that's the way I see that dropping out of your life. And then it's almost like going to the army and doing basic service, basic training. And then they take away everything that you became and they retrain you from scratch. Right. And that's right. How I feel it was.
Yeah, that was one of the benefits of the Holy Order of Mans in my training, was that like in the army, you go in, well, the first thing they do is they shave your head. Second thing they do is they take all your belongings. And I was never in the army. I just heard, but they get rid of those. They take all of your clothes, they throw those in the garbage can, and they give you a whole new set of clothes that give you a bald head and completely change your life, totally change your life. And that's what we did in the order. We had to cut our long hair. We had to ditch our tie-dyed stuff and frayed jeans and all of that. And we had to wear a suit with a priest collar, and we had a very regimented life. Everything from what we ate to what we were able to read to what we were able to speak, everything was regulated. And that's like a spiritual corset. Man, that's like a head to toe corset that just squeezes you down. And the purpose of that is it squeezes you so tight, it's like squeezing a banana, and you squeeze it hard enough, and that banana, the real part of the banana, pokes out of the top, just spurts out of the top. And that's spiritual transformation, right? They just squeeze you and squeeze you and squeeze you, and then pop, until you pop. It's grueling. It's really grueling. So that's what it looks like. And people, and this is what the crucifixion was. You look at the crucifixion, it was the very worst way to die. And, look at it categorically. He was betrayed by his friend. He was called a criminal. He was regarded as as illegitimate because they mocked him by putting a crown of thorns and fake staff. That said, "You're a fake," and they completely destroyed his body. All of his friends abandoned him. So he's not only betrayed by his friends, he was abandoned by them. So it's a limit case. This is like, it's meant to be a representation of the worst way to die. This is suffering at its maximum, because it's not in the physical details so much as it is in the categorical breakdowns that it represents, all of those that I just listed. So it's like, this is everything that can happen to you will happen to you. That's kind of the message. So, and as the second part of your question, Tom, can you do it from different levels? Oh yeah. And I've seen it. I've seen it not only in other people, I've seen it it's happened to me. And that's just as awful. And it's where it's like the saying, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. That is so true.
Example.
Huh?
Example.
You want an example?
You don't mind, you don't have to.
No, I'm not going to tell you my story. Jesus.
Okay. Pictures speak louder than words. Just thought I'd try.
Reveal it.
Well, how many, especially like in the Me Too movement, how many, celebrities fell from grace? I mean, really, Charlie Rose, Matt Lauer, I was going to say Harvey Weinstein, but nobody liked him anyway. But, he was a big movie mogul. How many people fell from grace like that? Just overnight, Kevin Spacey, one of the best actors who ever lived. And they were just completely, their lives were completely ruined. So they had achieved, each in their own category and their own, career, reached a higher level of that spiral and then fell from there. So it's even worse, because the higher you get, then you drop off at that level, and it's going to be even more devastating. So, and this is where Jesus was talking about, he said, don't try this unless you're really willing to give it all. He said, who builds a tower without first counting the cost and making sure he can complete it? Otherwise, everybody's going to mock him. Or who decides to go to war against an enemy, but doesn't, take stock of the enemy's strength and his own strength, so that he has a strategy. So it's unless you, in yoga, they say, I think one of the great yoga teachers said, unless you are as eager for as a man whose hair is on fire, for a pond of water to jump in, don't even start this. Don't even start it, because you've got to want it that much. That's what will carry you through.
Has a sign at the gate which says, abandon hope, all ye who enter here. And that's what they were saying about the spiritual path, is that because you can't set a time, you can't set a limit, you can't give God a time, you're going to go in, and what's going to happen is going to happen.
Yep. And this is where the saying is, the ego is the first thing to be attracted to spiritual development, but it's the last thing to let go. You see the student, the prospective student approaches the master and sees the master and says, wow, that's what I want to be. You see, but he's coming from a whole different place. He's coming from he wants to be built up. He wants to be rich and famous, or respected, or looked up to, or worshipped even. And that's all, he's projecting all of that onto the teacher. And the teacher just says, yeah. And the teacher, if it's a good teacher, he will, or she will, encourage that a little bit, right? Say, oh yeah, come on in. We're going to really polish you up. You're going to be great. Yeah. And so, but then a good teacher, a really good teacher, then all throughout the training process will subtly undermine that guru worship aspect, just little drops here and there, so that, and then the farther along the student gets, the more dramatic that becomes. And pretty soon then the student realizes, hey, the guru has to use the bathroom too. You see? In other words,
I was going to say, can we start every class with 5 minutes of crying, please? Let's have like a tear session, 5 minutes at the beginning of every class, because it can get really hectic.
Okay.
I think there's a name for that, isn't there, Michael? Spiritual materialism?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it's a biggie. It's a biggie.
Spiritual bypassing and spiritual materialism, two biggies.
Yep.
What's that, like worshiping the aspects of a guru, the spiritual materialism?
Yeah. For me, as a teenager, it was like Alan Watts and Eric Fromm and the Tao Te Ching and things
Alan
like that.
Watts had his problems.
Oh yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I wasn't thinking from the guru's perspective. I was thinking from adding to your ego. I want to be like that. But
that's what I mean. That's what I mean. I like with Alan Watts, those books were so, back then there wasn't an internet, everything, you had to buy the book.
Right.
And so those books were like sacred objects.
Yep.
But that's exactly spiritual materialism, because you worship the book, and that becomes a barrier to any further progress, because you can't advance farther than the book, and you're trying to map your own experience onto the experience of the author, and that only works a little bit. So when I entered the order, I was 20 years old when I entered the order, and they made me throw away all my books. I had to get rid of all of that. That was part of the training process. All of that you think get rid of it. Because
I've got a question.
Sure.
So, back when we were working with, I hit a point and just didn't know who I was anymore. Felt like I was completely falling apart. Found myself in meditation, sat for an hour one night and just crying in meditation. And a figure came to me that later I think was Mary. It was a female. And I kept asking, where is Jesus? Where is Jesus? And she came to me and walked up to me and said, he has gone to Giza. And I had never heard of it, had no idea what Giza was. I had to look it up. But what you just said about the steps of initiation, I'm wondering if that was an indication of the Christ part of me going through an initiation.
Mm-hmm.
Based on what you said. Am I understanding that? Because I've always thought, what the heck was that about? You know, and never understood.
Oh yeah, you might be wondering that for the rest of your life. But the vacuum of the, you know, not having an answer to that will be the vacuum that will draw you higher. It will pull you. It'll be like the wind under your wings. You know, it'll lift you.
Well, I think I've gotten maybe some understanding from just, you know, what you were saying earlier. That
yeah. He's gone to Giza. You know, that's where the pyramids are.
Yeah.
I can see several different levels of interpretation on that, you know, because they say that each astrological age has its avatar or great teacher, world teacher. And Jesus is the teacher for the Piscean age. So we're kind of all wondering, well, who's next? You see, we don't know if it's going to be an individual or if it's going to be a group of people or what, but we're definitely in a transition stage. So Mary saying that to you on that level, which is kind of a low level of interpretation, you know, because it doesn't apply to you necessarily, but it's like saying that, okay, Jesus is moving on to a higher initiation.
Michael,
yeah,
something that I've been wanting to ask you for a while now, which has been very confounding to me. And the guy said that Jesus is no longer our role model, and that we now have, because of the 5D consciousness thing, we can no longer use Jesus as our role model because now we start to become our own role model, or something to that effect.
Yeah,
really?
it's something like that. But we have to realize, you know, Ken Wilber describes this really well. He calls it integral spirituality, where like when you're a child and you move from the first grade to the second grade, you don't forget everything that you learned in the first grade. It's organized in such a way that you build upon what you learned. And when Jesus said, not one jot or one tittle will pass from the law until all is fulfilled, it's what he's talking about. It's like, even though if Jesus goes somewhere else and somebody else comes in, then that doesn't mean that we throw out everything that we learned under Jesus. You know, it doesn't mean that at all.
Is that possible?
Huh?
Is that possible? I mean, the Bible
is... Oh, yeah, people will try it. People always try to do it. You know, they'll just say, burn it all down. Everything that's traditional, everything that's gone before is now useless, and we see all the evil part of it. And so we're just going to burn it all down and then start from scratch. It's that start from scratch mentality that's falling off the cliff again, right? Because you can't. It's like Joan Borisenko or somebody said, maybe it was Marion Woodman. I never have figured that out, but it says keep an open mind, but don't let your brain fall out. Like when you come into a new stage of consciousness, you are not meant to discard all the practical, commonsensical, and realistic things that you have learned. No, you've got those under your belt. You've got those on that satchel at the end of your staff in the Fool card. That's what that represents. All of the things, the wisdom that you have accumulated thus far, you're bringing it with you. You see? But it's your perspective that will change. And as your perspective changes, then all of your wisdom experiences will then find a new series, a new way to express themselves. You see?
But all Jesus will still be Jesus forever and ever.
Pardon me?
Jesus will still be Jesus forever and ever.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
He is the Son of God. Yeah.
Just as dawn will be dawn.
Yeah.
Michael be Michael.
Okay. I wanted to make sure.
Yeah. Yeah. But
I was very confused by that.
yeah. Well, there are stages on the path of initiation where you lose your name. You become what in mystical circles is called a nameless wanderer.
One of the reasons I kind of left the church system was it destroyed my relationship with Jesus and with the Bible, the system. It was just. But as far as Jesus goes, they had no interest in going within and finding answers within. Everything was the Bible and their interpretation of what they read there. And
yeah, and Sean,
I just had enough.
Yeah, at that level, that's absolutely essential. That's that first grade level,
Mm-hmm.
So and the purpose of that is to drill it into your head, right? It's to get the story straight. And in a sense, they worship the story because they have to. It's like they're the ones who keep the story intact. They protect the story from over-interpretation.
It's their income.
Well, yeah, but if you take all away, the human motivational part of it, and the wanting to belong to a group and all of that, and having a stable belief structure that you can rely on, and so it keeps you from having to think too hard. Belief is a real necessary step because you have to know the Bible really literally and correctly and sequentially, so that later you can identify the story with the inner reality that the story is describing. You make the leap from a literal interpretation to a mythological interpretation. Then you begin to see, oh yeah, the three temptations of Jesus. Wow, those are exactly the same as the three temptations of Buddha. Exactly. I mean, exactly. You see these memes
They're
about
afraid to do that.
Huh?
They're afraid to do anything like that. It's all demon worship in their minds.
See, that's the second grade, right? So the first grade, you've got all the story, and then the second grade is you're learning a different perspective on the story. And that's called the mythological interpretation. And that's where you see these memes where they list all the things about Jesus. He was born of a virgin, died and resurrected and, ascended, all of that. And they show all the religions where that same motif is used. Mm-hmm. And it's a real eye-opener. But that's just the second grade. You see, the third grade is the mystical interpretation. See, in the mythological interpretation, you see, wow, these teachings are universal.
Yeah.
That is amazing. But then you come into the realization, wow, the hero in all of these stories and the villains and all the things they go through, that's me.
Mm-hmm.
That's all happening inside me. Judas Iscariot, Pilate, Herod, Mother Mary, Jesus, all the 12 apostles, all the places in the Holy Land, all of that stuff, that whole story, those all describe aspects of each of us inside. That's our internal landscape. All of those characters are parts of our psyche. And the way they interact in the story is a description of how those different aspects of ourselves interact within us.
Mm-hmm.
You see? And then there are levels above that. You see? It keeps going.
Yeah. I've experienced them, as you I don't know, maybe experiences in meditation and things like that. It just comes to light. Oh wow, yeah, that's what the Bible thing was. But I can't interact with the Christian outlook anymore. They think I'm going to hell, and that tore me up for a lot of years. The whole health thing.
Yeah,
it really was a problem.
Yeah.
But,
oh God, I can remember. I grew up for a few years. I was in Catholic school as a kid, and I just loved it. I mean, the sitting in the cathedral and being in that environment, and I used to love to go into the little gift shop they had in the entryway, and And I was describing that to my wife. I can remember this like it was yesterday. I was expressing all this longing, and my ex-wife now, she's a priest also and a teacher like I am, and I'm sitting there describing with all this nostalgia and this longing for the feeling, that feeling that I had being a kid in the church. And I was describing this little bullet-shaped thing that had two doors and open up, and inside it was a little statue of Mary, and then you close the doors. Like it was a tiny little shrine you could set on a bookshelf or on your desk. And she just looked at me and said, "What has that got to do with Christ?" Just blew me apart, just blew that right. And I never experienced that again, Yeah. God damn it,
But we are sentimental beings. That's what we do. We find things, we find images of things that are close to our heart if we can't have the thing that we want in the room with us, and that's human, I think.
Yeah.
So
and I had to go through a mourning process over that. It only lasted a few minutes, but it was like, and this is, again, it's like Jesus saying, "Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted." There is this is a thing that it's really important to realize that when we let go of these aspects of our self-image, it hurts. It really hurts. And you go through a mourning process. You have to, letting go requires mourning. And you have to let yourself do that. It's a necessary part of the process. But see, now what I just described, that's a mystical interpretation, right? Because like, think about in the Catholic Church, for centuries, if a daughter entered a convent, she had to say goodbye to her family and would never see them again. And her family would know the same. They would have to say goodbye to their daughter, knowing that they would never see her again. Can you imagine the kind of sorrow and sadness and mourning that would involve? You see? So that's what we go through. There's an external expression of that, but that's what we go internally when we have to let go of this exalted self-image that we have. That hurts. So we where was it? Subramania, the American Hindu master, who died in 2001, I think. He went through this process with his teacher's guru in Ceylon, and at a certain point in part of his training was to really be active in service work in the village where his guru lived. So everybody knew him, and he was tall and striking looking person anyway. So everybody knew him and they loved him. Well, at some point, Subramania is in seclusion, and his teacher announces to the village that he's died. And they have a funeral for him. He comes out of seclusion. Everybody's like, "What?" But see, here was like, gurus can be really tricky in that way. And so what it was an outpicturing of an inner reality, because the old person, this guy, forget what his actual name was, but his teacher gave him the name Subramania. Then, but Robert Hansen, who he was, that was his name. Robert Hansen died, and Subramania was born.
Right.
See, and this is exactly what Jesus was talking about, because Jesus was a guru.
That's absolutely true.
Yep. Said you must be born again.
Mm-hmm.
The identity, your self-identity, that's got to die. You see, that's what he was telling Nicodemus in that little scenario. He said, and essentially what Jesus was telling Nicodemus was he was a member of the Sanhedrin, the ruling body of the Temple of Jerusalem. He was one of the top dogs. He was attracted to Jesus as a teacher, and came to him at night saying, what do I have to do to become enlightened? Or, to achieve salvation, or however that's put, same thing. And Jesus said, you have to be born again. And Nicodemus, of course, being a legalistic mind, real sharp, he said, what are you talking about? You mean I have to climb back into my mother's womb and be born again? And because that's the material mind, right? He said, no, you have to be born of fire and water. You have to, and what he was saying was, look, just because you're a member of the chosen people, that's not going to get you into heaven. You can't ride into heaven on somebody else's coattails. This is not a collective enterprise. You don't get in because you're a card-carrying member of the Jewish race, or if you're a Buddhist, or if you're a Catholic, or if you're a Protestant. Doesn't matter. That your affiliation will not get you into heaven. So you have to go in alone. And in order to do that, you have to renounce all your affiliations. You see, and this is an inside job. You see, didn't mean that Nicodemus was no longer a Jew. No, that you're always you're always active in your affiliation, but internally you have to let go of those affiliations. Can no longer identify with them, because that doesn't cut it. Anything you do in that mindset doesn't count. You have to approach the precipice of initiation of your own accord, not because somebody told you to do it, not because somebody told you it was something that is really great. It has to, the desire for God has to arise, has to come up from within you. That's the only way it counts. The actions that really, and going back to the works, versus grace conundrum, it's like you have to initiate an action for that action to actually write itself on your soul. It cannot be externally motivated. It has to arise as something. It's not something you want to do. It's something you have to do. Do you know why a chick hatches out of the egg when it does? It's because the amniotic fluid within the egg becomes toxic.
Okay.
The chick is literally battling for its life. That's what gives it the desire and the will to break out of that environment. That's how it has to work. All right, guys, this has been great. Really a great way to start my day. So look forward to seeing you again.
Thanks, everybody.
Very nice. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was a lovely discussion. I enjoyed it. Thank you. Have an amazing week, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.